All right. What's up, Barcelona? How you doing? Yes. I see you guys have been outside already. I see. All right. Well, I have an excellent panel here today. We're going to be talking about research advancements and some of the emerging research that's been going on with these awesome panelists who I'll let them introduce themselves. Why don't we start with you?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. Thank you very much for the organization to invite me to this amazing event. My name is Alberto Sainz. I'm from Spain. I'm based in Barcelona, so if you need any recommendations later, you can hit me up. No problem. So my background is in psychology and neuroscience, and I've been working for the cannabis industry for the last 10 years. I'm a clinical and behavioral scientist. I've been doing research on how cannabis affects the brain and how the therapeutic potential of cannabis can actually work on humans. So through my work in the academia and the work on the industry, we are trying to find if cannabis is actually helping patients to treat their diseases, to treat their symptoms. For this, I worked for 8 years in a greenhouse company that had a medical branch, and I was doing research from biomedical to clinical, like from in vitro studies to human studies, also with animal studies. And for the last 2 years, I'm working as a consultant in a company that is called the Broughton Group from the UK, and we help companies to put their products on the market, mostly vaporizers from the nicotine, cannabis, and pharma industry. So I think I'm really looking forward for this conversation. I think it's going to be a really good one. I'll let him introduce himself now.
Awesome. Thank you. Rui?
Good morning. Good afternoon. I'm very happy to be here. I want to thank the organization for the invitation to be in this panel. My name is Rui Soares. I'm founder and CEO of Paralab. We are a company based in Portugal and Spain. We have a mix of distribution of laboratory analytical and process instrumentation for initially for many years, for over 30 years on the pharmaceutical industry. And with the starting legalization of medical cannabis production and processing in Portugal in 2018, we were brought to this field. Extraction, it has been always one of our main topics in our business, either manufacturing systems, either distributing more higher capacity systems too. But over these years, by request of our customers, somehow we expanded also for the post-harvest, so bucking, trimming, and so on. So we can say that from the moment you cut, you harvest your plant, we have been present. One of our big concerns, it has always been, because in Europe until now it has been medical cannabis, so we have to follow EU GMP guidelines to make sure that solutions were compliant with these guidelines, and also to optimize the processes, most especially on extraction and on purification, where we see that the knowledge that there is for cannabis doesn't allow yet to take these processes, many of the processes on extraction or purification, to the most efficient level, to the most efficient and also according to the guidelines, consistent products with purities, and basically to assure that the product is a safe product for the consumers on medical cannabis.
Right. Very cool. Justin?
All right. Good to see everybody here. My name is Justin Tomby. I am here on behalf of the Tallman Group as we sort of lead efforts to upgrade research and development activities here in the cannabis industry, both in Europe and globally, to more professional standards. I'm from Oregon originally. My background is cannabis. I grew up in the culture. I've been involved in sort of every stage of the industry's development, from pre-medical to medical to recreational to hemp at scale. I helped found and lead hemp breeding company by the name of Phytonics, where we did genomic cross-indexing of phenotypes and genotypes to different cannabinoid profiles and then different cultivation methodologies and produced lines and varieties of hemp for different application. I've also had a background at one point in a R&D tech incubator for non-thermal plasma technology, so I know the value of good R&D, good data management, and good practices and methodology, a lot of which has been missing in cannabis research over the years because of various biases and lack of basic supporting context and information. So our goal here is to kind of elevate the conversation about what makes good research in the cannabis space and how we can get there, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome. And then my friend from Slovenia.
Hello everybody, I'm Božidar Radišić, I'm coming from Slovenia. I'm founder and project manager of Research Nature Institute. We are actually supporting Slovenian and international patients with quality control of their products now for last 9 years, I think. And later on, this was the first part, we also starting to organize education for doctors and nurses because we realized that if doctors are not educated, cannabis will never be a part of the medical system. So I think it's the most important issue, and I hope that industry will, accept that and maybe support more research like the pharma industry do. But cannabis is very special and field, so I hope that the industry will see that it's really necessary. Other things that we are doing, because I was also in jail because of cannabis, we started to make this legalization or regulation process in Slovenia, which in last 2-3 years, also with help of the Talman Group, made big leaps in Slovenia, and I hope that we will be the next country following Germany soon.
All right, very cool. Round of applause for our panelists. We're going to get this thing started, and thank you. And my name is Alex Revich. I'm from Canada. Started in 2013 in the legal industry, which 10 years in the legal industry feels like 100 years sometimes. And been helping with ICBC since the first one in Berlin. Hopefully we'll see you there. And excited to be talking with these great panelists about research. And the first thing we want to talk about is, why is the research so important? I mean, we touched on it a little bit, and maybe we'll start with you since you kind of touched on it. Why is research so important? Why do we need to even be doing this?
Of course, the research is most important that the professionals get enough usable data to bring the cannabis into mainstream medicine. Actually, cannabis is the most researched plant on the planet with over 150,000 published studies. But still, the doctors or the professionals, they don't have any protocols, they don't have actually any base to prescribe cannabis, at least in Slovenia. Cannabis in the last 70 years was mentioned just in a bad connotation, not as a medicine. And I think this 70-year-old propaganda still ongoing made a big damage. And this is what we want to turn over.
Some other thoughts? Why else is research so important? Any other thoughts?
So I think research is always important in that it generates knowledge and data that can be used in practical application, but it's dependent on the methodology of the research, right? So you can conduct studies with sort of narrow scope and kind of preset biases about what your outcomes are likely to be, or you can also conduct research without necessary context, and those are going to predispose your results to limited application. So one of the things that's happening now is we're looking at sort of a wider range of how we can carry research out that certainly wasn't allowed before. And I think that the outcome of having more data available is that then there's more specificity and more effectiveness in application, and whether that's medical, right, and whether we're talking about the use of cannabinoids as agonists for CB1 and 2 receptors that reduce cell proliferation and tumor formation for glioblastoma, right? That's very specific, but then which cannabinoids and which ratios in which clinical settings are going to be most effective? Well, okay, have we addressed that? Or if we're talking about the use of cannabis fibers in electrophoresis for substrates for supercapacitors and energy storage, these are really different, but the level of background contextual information, the openness to different outcomes, and the methodology used will definitely influence what the result is, and that's what we really want. Is we want good results to guide good decision making. So we have to have high quality research to do that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And we were backstage, we were talking about the importance around education. We hear doctors all the time saying, oh, there's not enough research and we don't know enough research. Well, how do they get this research? Because there is a lot of research out there, but sometimes they don't really make too much of an effort to go out of their way. And maybe it's because the pharma companies are so in their face with all their research. What can we do better to make sure that the doctors are learning about this research because it's so important? Alberto or Rui, want to touch on that?
Well, first point is we have the research because research gives you knowledge. But it's also the way you do this research. If we want doctors to start prescribing cannabis, we have to do research with statistical relevance. I'm not saying that ideally this would be like Pharma Way, with clinical studies and so on, but this takes many years and tens, hundreds of millions. But the studies have to have statistical relevance. Then, with this data, it's absolutely necessary to start educating the doctors. And there is, I think, not one magical solution for everything. Different countries have different realities, maybe even legal requirements. But it's absolutely necessary to create, I think, courses. It's not just making like a congress. Talking about Portugal, where I come, there is 1 or 2 meetings per year about medical cannabis in which doctors are invited. But after these 2 meetings, doctors go home and they forget. Either if there isn't a specialization, few weeks, ideally some months specialization training that doctors can attend, there will never be doctors that will be really willing, or a big number of doctors that is really willing to start prescribing cannabis. This is a main issue. We need specialization courses on cannabis. How long? It will depend, but it's not with meetings, congresses. You need these courses. Now, depending, and again with Portuguese reality, we should strive to have the Doctors Association blessing. Because without this Doctors Association blessing, there will be, just by happening, there will be doctors start prescribing, being evangelized, understanding the benefits of the medical cannabis. But to have a major impact, then it comes with lobbying also. Yep. It depends what is stakeholder. Maybe sometimes it's the government. In Portugal, it's not so much the government, but exactly this medical association, that they have to give the blessing to these courses so that then the doctors win without fear of any lawsuit or liability, that they can start prescribing cannabis. No fear.
That's a good point. Alberto, what do you think?
Yeah, to me, it's quite clear that we need research to understand exactly how cannabis affects the body and the therapeutic potential of this plant. We need to know exactly if these treatments are safe, and we also need to investigate the efficacy of these treatments. And obviously, we need to train the doctors so they can understand when they can prescribe this. But the evidence that we are creating at the moment is only clinical evidence, and clinical evidence costs a lot of money. And a clinical trial costs millions of euros, and not everybody is able to spend that money to create that evidence that doctors may need. On the other hand, we also have what is called the real-world evidence, that these types of studies are observational studies that can still be run by doctors. So we can train the doctors to collect the feedback data from the patients and use that data to create that evidence to understand how cannabis can really help to certain medical conditions, and that knowledge will come back to the doctors to understand how it works. So we don't only need to train the doctors on how they can use cannabis for the patients, but we also have to train them to collect data so we can make the evidence larger. We can create more evidence so we know exactly how cannabis works.
Great point. Justin?
Yeah, I just wanted to add real quickly to what Alberto was saying, a real-world example. Johns Hopkins University is launching in this year a study of a large cohort of 10,000 patients who are engaging what they call from a cannabis naive position, so their first time to begin using cannabis medically. And they're working with a nonprofit out of Colorado called the Realm for Caring. They got a $10 million grant from the federal government, and they're tracking the a variety of different health indicators and metrics over a minimum of the first year, frequent check-ins to begin with. Later afterwards, they're looking at dosage, they're looking at cannabinoid ratios, they're looking across these wide range of again health indicators to create kind of a database about a bunch of different therapeutic uses, and then that would be an aggregate form of data that, back to Alberto's point, could be utilized to better inform and train doctors about how cannabis use in all these different contexts affects, interactions with other drugs, different health outcomes, things like that. So having the research and the data on one side and then having that accessible to the healthcare professionals is really important.
Agreed. You have a thought?
I just want to add something, until the cannabis and endocannabinoid system will not be the part of curriculum in the schools and universities, we have done nothing. We are just throwing a little bit of water into big fire, and there will be no success, That's the point. And if we start to educate those people today, it will be available in 10 years. When we have first generation of, informed physicians.
That's an excellent point. Thank you. Applaud that for sure. I wanted to touch on therapeutic benefits of these cannabinoids. In Canada, we have a lot of CBG, CBN products that get in a lot of talk, and I hate when people say that it's a new cannabinoid. They're not new cannabinoids. These cannabinoids have been there the whole time. We just never really knew anything about them. But it's creating a lot of excitement. Like my mom is taking CBN gummy, and I was joking with you that she used to yell at me that cannabis is ruining my life, and now she's taking it, and she's telling her friends about it. We're starting to see a lot of these cool new therapeutic cannabinoids without really any of the research. And I wanted to see from the panelists, what other exciting things are you seeing on the research side that you're excited about on the therapeutic advancements? Anything you'd like to talk about, anything specific that you're excited about with that? You want to start?
Yeah, from my side, well, I'm really looking forward for the data of what I was talking before, of the real-world evidence, like the Johns Hopkins study that is being done, and also there is a program in the UK that is called 2021 that they're also collecting a lot of feedback from patients. I think that's what's going to change everything. Once we know exactly what works and for which medical conditions, from the real experience of the patients. I'm really looking forward for that. And on the other hand, one of the studies that I'm going to start soon is also the psychopharmacology of minor cannabinoids to see how CBDV can affect the brain, CBC, CBN, CBG, but from a clinical perspective. It would be kind of a clinical trial to see the psychopharmacology of minor cannabinoids. So it's something that I'm also looking forward for that. And in general, what I want to see is more research on minor cannabinoids and well-done research, because there's not enough funds to do all these things. I think it would be also interesting to get public funds to do these things, because otherwise the only ones that could do this research would be the pharmaceutical industry. And the pharmaceutical industry, I think, it plays a role here, and it can be important because obviously they put in resources to do research, but we have to find also other ways to do research that can benefit to also smaller companies and obviously the academia.
Cool. Thoughts?
This is not much my area, but some of the things I'm going and seeing and reading, it was very interesting seeing some studies, recent research in autism treatment with CBDV and diabetes even, although it's not a critical disease so much as the others with JCV. But we are talking here about the research for the patients, and you're talking about minor cannabinoids. And by minor, then, when it comes to get them available, let's say in extracts, becomes really expensive and complicated to get this, and so increasing the price of these cannabinoids. And there has been lots of research, and nowadays is not even so uncommon to find flowers, buds with the plants producing high contents of THCV. So THCV, for instance, is not anymore a minor for those strains. This is other research happening that at the end will be very relevant then for the application of these cannabinoids for the therapeutics that doctors and researchers like Alberto are finding for these cannabinoids.
Yeah, for sure. And, we're seeing, do you want to add anything to that?
In terms of therapeutic applications?
Yeah.
I'll just put a brief plug in for something that's a huge problem for us in the US. Due to some irresponsibility on the pharmaceutical industry's part and the ineffectiveness of regulators, we have a huge opioid dependency issue in the US, and the impact is significant, can't be understated. There has been research done showing the benefits of cannabis use for adjunct treatments for opioid dependency, and show marked statistically significant increases in efficacy of treatment, north of 20% increase in the cannabis user cohort, as well as decreased rates of recidivism. So that's an area I'd like to just highlight, say it's a powerful way that cannabis can help, and something I'd like to see more research in.
For sure.
In the cannabis case, I think the pharma industry and mainstream research industry, let's put it that way, they actually don't know how to do it, because they are mostly looking for molecules for certain condition or disease. But with cannabis, it's other way around. You have to adjust to your endocannabinoid system and so on. So I think this is also the reason why, now year before was THCV, now is CBN, then is CBG, all those minor cannabinoids, but we never look into the whole picture and how the cannabis affect the endocannabinoid system actually. And when we figure this out, it will be way easier.
Yeah, no, excellent point. And something we were also talking backstage is around the importance around quality and innovation and technology. Your research is only as good as the quality of what you're researching. I mean, there was an example in Canada where someone was doing some research and they found that the cannabis wasn't effective, like people were not getting good results. And I said, wait, where are you getting the cannabis from? And I won't mention the company name, but the company product is terrible. And then it's like, of course they're not getting good results. They're getting like, hey, this isn't cannabis. So we were talking backstage about some of the innovations, whether in plant production or whether in extraction, in research methodologies. Maybe we could just talk about something, and then we're going to open it up to questions. So if anyone has any questions, get ready for them. But talk about some breakthroughs you're seeing in your own perspective areas that you are excited about that can actually help the research side. Because without the product quality, it doesn't matter the research that's being done. So who wants to start us off? Maybe Justin, with the plants, what's some of the research being done on the plants so that the research on the patients is benefited?
Yeah, well, it all starts with the plants, right? So obviously, from my background, we start looking at genotypes and then cultivating specific varieties that can predispose plants to producing more or less of certain cannabinoids, right? So if we want to emphasize THCVA as one of the minors in the production of that, we start looking at it genetically. But it's not just a genetic expression, right? We have also all of the environmental or abiotic, epigenetic influences that change how the plant creates secondary metabolites. So that means that you can change the light, the color, frequency, intensity of the light, and that changes the relative ratios of different kinds of cannabinoids that are produced. So UVB light tends to drive THC and CBD production. There's been research that illustrates that, whereas certain kinds of LED lighting with a more full spectrum and lower intensity has been shown to get the ratio of CBG to THC production down closer to 1 to 2 as opposed to 1 to 16. So that's an example of where you use something like light spectrum to impact what the plant's producing, which will then relate to a feedstock product for ultimately the patient. Mm-hmm. I also think in terms of, it's important to say on the whole value chain, beginning from the plant all the way up, if you want good medicine for people, you have to treat the whole process with respect. You can't just be profit driven in this. You can't look at the lowest cost inputs and have no mindfulness about what chemicals you are using in the soil of the plants or the extraction processes, which solvents might be left behind. You really have to come at this from respecting ultimately the value of the life of the ecosystem, the plant itself, and then the patient that's ultimately going to use that. So we always advocate for highest standards of practice in cultivation, organics, biodynamics, regenerative, and you can kind of follow that up. And that might be a place where it's good for me to pass this over to Rui, because I believe, he and I have had conversations speaking to the importance of upholding those same kind of standards when it comes to extraction and processing.
Yeah, that's very important for sure. Rui, some thoughts?
One of the main issues with extraction is that if you start with a bad flower, low potency flower, you always get also extracts that are not very potent and with more impurities. If you want high quality extracts without going in over many steps of purification, in which you will end up also losing compounds that are of interest, you'd have to work always with high potency, high quality flower. Nowadays, based on CO2 extraction, but in different conditions of standard supercritical conditions, you are able, independently of the potency of the flower, it can be 5% potency, it can be 25% potency, you will always get extracts, let's say a full spectrum oil as first extract, with potencies always over 80 to 85. So these are methods in which the conditions of the solvent is very, very selective to cannabinoids. This is why you always get the high potencies, even starting with plants with low potency. This is quite important because at the same time, using these technologies, you can also maintain high levels of terpenes. People always speak about full spectrum oil, but what's a full spectrum oil? A full spectrum oil is an oil on an extract in which the chemistry of the extract is very similar to the chemistry of the flower. So the ratios of cannabinoids are the same on extract and in flower. The ratios of terpenes are the same in the extract and in flower, and the ratio between total cannabinoids and total terpenes are the same. If many extraction techniques will not keep these ratios, so saying that you have a full spectrum oil many times is just marketing, is not a true full spectrum oil. These kind of new technologies, you get real full spectrum oils. It also makes life easier when you move then to distillates or even to isolates, because in these techniques you can opt to take the terpenes or 90% of the terpenes out, making life in terms of purification and rectification of the extract quite easier.
Yeah.
This is a big impact.
Oh, that's a good point. And we like to joke that garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
They expect to just take some garbage product, throw it in there, and magic is going to come out. Well, if it was garbage before, it's not. There's no magic formula that takes some garbage, old, stale cannabis and turns it into fire, as we like to joke about it. So that's a good point.
There is even also coming not to extraction but for production. There are also developments. This applies more for indoor facilities. Indoor facilities usually is seen that a way to produce cannabis with less contamination, microbiological, bioburden issues, less microbes, less bacteria, less mold. Nevertheless, even in indoor, things can go wrong, and typically as these facilities age, you end up having an increased number of contaminations. There are also nowadays new technologies that allow you to, so by working continuously 24 hours 7, to eliminate 98% of pathogens. And it's in the air, in surface, walls, ceilings, but most especially on the surface of your flower. So this will have, you end up with a flower that is far less contaminated, will not require treatments like irradiation that always affect the quality of flower.
It does.
This can have a massive impact.
It dries it up, kills the terpenes. We've seen it. Any last thought, Justin, before we open up for questions?
Just wanted to tag really quickly on the whole meta picture of indoor cultivation versus greenhouse and outdoor, as there is this sort of view paradigm that in order to quality control and increase purity and security, there's a drive to put things in indoor conditions for cultivation. And it's a question worth really evaluating in the long term, whether this makes sense. I pose this for everybody to consider and take home with them. The energy intensity in cultivation, if we were talking about things in terms of a CO2 footprint or an energy consumption or environmental impact of indoor systems in cultivation, needs to really be looked at. And in terms of what we look at for purity and whether there are biological contaminants, microbial contaminants. Part of that is a misunderstanding. The thought that all microbes need to be controlled is a misunderstanding. Pathogens occur in the absence of beneficial microorganisms, and really understanding how to cultivate beneficial, strong, healthy, robust micro ecosystems in the soil and on the plant, then actually, as a cultivator, you can eliminate a lot of the potential for pathogens. The same thing in your processing practices for curing and all that. So I want to just push back a little bit against the assumption that you need to create laboratory-like aseptic conditions to grow and process your cannabis in order to have a high-quality, high-purity, healthy product. And I think in the larger context, we need to examine those assumptions.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think along that lines, it's around the consistency. We want to have a consistency so it's always the same. I mean, when we make our edibles, people think of edibles as recreational products, but really they're an excellent meter dose way of using cannabinoids. Smoking a joint and then doing research is a very difficult thing because it's always so different. But having some meter dose, and also I work with a company called Zentrella, which we were talking about before, where they have an EEG headband that measures brain waves and tells you when did you get high, how high did you get, and for how long. These are the types of things that are going to revolutionize that. So just want to open it up to some, first round of applause for our panelists. Very, very insightful. I see a question back over there. Sorry. Got 5 minutes for questions.
Hey guys, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. I could geek out with you guys for a while. I'm Max Cope.
Yeah, we could for sure.
CEO at Abstracts. Justin, you did a great job mentioning narrow, broad scopes with Johns Hopkins, and although this one's going wider, I appreciate them also having a narrow focus with that study. Rui, I believe you mentioned some of our research possibly on with Western Washington on the studies done with terpenes and autism. And Alberto, I totally agree with you that minor cannabinoids need not only more research behaviorally, but also toxicology. With abstracts, we've invested significant resources into researching cannabis aroma compounds, putting out a lot of publications on the science of exotic, thiols, esters, flavorants, everything that affects the cannabis experience. And so there's a lot of talk here about cannabinoids and how they affect experience. But as Rui, you mentioned our research with Western Washington, these play a bigger part in here. I would argue some of these more smaller volatile compounds we're discovering have a broader impact in the experience. And so what can we do together to help foster more research? We got a great relationship with Johns Hopkins as a good example, but they don't always include us in everything that they're doing. And so how do we start chemotyping these and including more of the aroma complexes, the cannabis chemistry that is really defining the experience of these products so that it's not subjectively tailored towards cannabinoids alone? And secondarily, if we have time, love to just listen, maybe what's your most favorite research on the horizon that you guys are most excited about? Thank you.
Let's start with the one, and I don't know, we'll see if there's no more questions, and we'll hit that second question. But maybe with this first question, go ahead, Justin.
It's a great question. The role of terpenes, terpenoids, as an example of these aromatics, is it's becoming better appreciated, but it's still not well understood. There's been alternative classification systems for genotyping proposed on terpene synthesis pathways, which is an interesting sort of way to look at the plant. I don't know that there is like a silver bullet kind of approach to how do we generate more research on the role of terpenes, but I think it has to be addressed from initially maybe a therapeutic perspective, right? And so in order to do that, we also have to have a better understanding of the terpene profiles and ratios of the source material that's being used therapeutically, right? So we have a very limited sort of understanding already having to do with the cannabinoid profile of what's being used as a medical cannabis product. In most cases, people aren't really paying attention to the ratios and the contents at anything but a superficial level. So making sure that that becomes part of the conversation, that you have an informed patient / consumer, and then that goes to the practitioner. And I think that maybe drives research. Maybe it's the other way around, but I think part of it is just educating people about the role. And you can look at them in abstracts, right? You can look at fractionated and isolated terpenes, where they're derived from. You can look at how they act in isolation. But really what we're looking at is a synergistic whole in the relationship. So I would say you start with making that more of a conversation at that entry level.
Yeah, agreed. I don't know if we have any more time. I think we're out of time. We don't. Sorry, I wish we could sit here all day, talk with these panelists with questions, but Ngayo's here.
I'm very strict. Let's hear it again for the whole panel. That was very informative.